morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, and members of the global real estate community. On behalf of FIABC Nigeria and our partners, Fortren Company, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar. Thank you all for taking time out to join us in what promises to be a very timely and insightful conversation: the impact of the Middle East crisis on Africa's real estate and construction sector. We are living in an increasingly interconnected world. Events taking place thousands of kilometers away rarely stay there. Whether it is a conflict, rising energy prices, supply chain disruptions, inflation, currency volatility, or shifts in global investment patterns, every major geopolitical event eventually finds its way into our economies, our businesses, and ultimately our real estate markets. For Africa, this presents both a challenge and, of course, opportunities. Today's discussion is therefore not simply about understanding the crisis. It is about understanding how Africa's real estate professionals, developers, investors, financiers, consultants, and policymakers can respond strategically, remain resilient, and even identify new opportunities in an evolving global marketplace. We have assembled an outstanding panel of industry leaders who bring diverse perspectives across development, transactions, facility management, and international real estate leadership. I encourage everyone on this call today to stay engaged, ask questions, and participate actively. I believe will be a rich and extremely thought-provoking conversation. It is now my distinct honor and privilege to welcome someone whose leadership continues to inspire real estate professionals across more than 70 countries. She is a respected international business leader and accomplished real estate professional, and currently serves as the world president of FIABC, International Real Estate Federation. Under her leadership, FIABC continues to strengthen collaboration across continents, promote sustainable real estate development, and foster global partnerships that benefits our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me warmly to welcome our world president, Mrs. Lily Chang, to deliver her opening remark. Madam President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. For such beautiful time, beautiful saying. My name is Lin Chang, and I'm really very new world president since June 12th evening. And I'm the developer in Taiwan for 37 years. And because I also have my construction company. And that is why, I'm really so interesting about today's subject. You are talking about the world effect to our real estate business. And in the beginning, I really say, I really so thank you, for you to invite me. Like I told you, even I'm not there, but it seems like I already in Nigeria, like last year. Our World Congress, I really so enjoy, and enjoy your hospitality to welcome everybody from outside Nigeria. And I really do hope someday I can go back again. And today's, I think this subject is kind of, for some reason, probably a little bit sensitive, but as a real estate, as a developers, we really have to facing this kind of situation and to know what we stand for. So I think to political uncertainty creates a challenge for the real estate industry. So not only in Africa, I think it's around the world. So if you want me to say something, I would like to have three really major things I really care. Okay, the first one is investment confidence. When there's uncertainty increase, like today's subject, the investor become more cautious because uncertain. So we don't know what we have to facing. And then secondly is the construction costs and the supply chain. Like what the moderator just saying, the supply chain will definitely will affect. So the building material, logistic, and the financing become more expensive and then less predictable because we cannot predict what we're gonna facing. Okay. And the third is the resilient cities because no matter what we have to facing in our cities, because that is our major development area, the city will with I think we need good governance and transparency and the long-term planning continue to attract investment even during the uncertain time. Okay. So I think this 3 point is what we facing today's subject, and as a developer, as a constructor, or as a realtor, we all have to do is for this 3 point. I think it's very important for us. So I really so appreciate, and I gonna be the audience too, to enjoy whatever today's your nice speaker will share your experience, and really thank you. And hopefully, because Taiwan and Nigeria even is very quiet away, but as world president, we always host one of the trade mission in our country. And in September 14 to 16 is our event days. So in this moment, I would like to also invite all of you, if you have chance, come over and let's have more um, how you say, sharing the best practice and learning from each other. So far, thank you again, and I leave the floor back to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, my world president. That was fantastic, and thank you for laying out the foundation for this discussion so eloquently. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Okay, so
Yes.
let me formally introduce our seasoned moderator so that he can take charge and introduce our professional speakers. So we have Martin Uche, CEO of Research, CEO of
Um, can anybody still hear me, sir?
No, I think his internet probably ceased.
Okay, it's fine. Okay.
I think it's frozen. It's frozen.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe you
I
want
think
to
he
just
just yeah
go on.
he was just about to ask me to take over.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining this call. I'm going to formally introduce our speakers today. And thank you, our chief host and our host, for making this possible. These conversations are extremely important in advancing the markets that we operate in. And in a market like Nigeria, it's even more important. Um, so I'm just going to introduce our speakers very briefly and give them a moment to say hi to the audience. And by the way, as at this moment, we have close to 200 people joining our live stream on LinkedIn on the various platforms. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. So we have three speakers to help us unpack this conversation that has been carefully selected across the most important value chains in the industry. So we have uh, a developer on this conversation. We have a seasoned real estate practitioner who has, spearheaded a lot of transactions across, multiple cities and, countries around the world. And we have a seasoned operator in the house who has, managed multiple complex real estate developments from a property and facility management standpoint. So we have a builder, we have the transactions people, and we have the operators. So we're going to have a very 360-degree conversation that touch on all parts and segments of the market. And this, for our audience, you are definitely going to get a lot of value from this conversation. So at this point, I'll just introduce our first speaker who will say hello and will say and move on from there. So we have on this call Mr. Agbenga Olaniyo, who is the chairman of Estate Links. He was former CEO at Estate Links, and then also the principal partner was also the principal partner of Bengalani and Associates. And we have Mr. Hakim Oginero, who's a developer in the house, a seasoned developer in the house. He's the CEO of Eximia Realty, And then we have Mrs. Adetun Otepola, who is assistant facility manager in the house. I'll just give you a moment to say hello to the audience before we dive right into the conversation, starting with you, Mr. Benga.
Good. Is it morning or afternoon? Well, wherever you are. Good morning from Nigeria.
Good morning, Mr. Hakim. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Benga.
morning. Good morning from Nigeria. I'm very pleased to be here this morning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hakim. Good morning to you. Good morning, Mr. Adetun.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be in the room.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, we'll just set a global context for this conversation. And I think the word president has helped us do a lot of that. Mrs. Lily, can you still hear us? Okay. Hopefully she joins back in. But we want to set like a broader context to this conversation. And I'll start with you, Mr. Benga. Can you take us back a little bit back to 2025? Today, the challenge we are seeing in the Middle East, like Mr. Akin mentioned, is having broader impact across the world. And Africa, I believe, is one of the most impacted region as a result of that conflict. Oil prices, prices, cost of building construction, cost of materials for operators, cost of running estates have increased significantly over the past 18 to 24 months. From your perspective, and I'd like you to speak specifically to transactions that you're seeing in the market, what has changed between 2025 and today?
Okay, thank you very much. One thing I would mention is, you see, when I saw this topic, one of the most critical things I thought about was that we need to be very careful separating issues that happened before the Middle East crisis from issues that are happening after the crisis started. But let me go straight to the point. Compared with 2025, what we are seeing is that in countries like Nigeria, because we're talking about Africa, but obviously since we are here in Nigeria, majority of our conversations will be based on Nigeria. But big countries, solid economies such as Nigeria, Kenya, Morocco, South Africa, I would say, based on what I know, not too many changes have happened. And I'll talk specifically on Nigeria. One of the main reasons is the fact that we saw very heavily spikes in construction costs prior to 2025. In fact, I have been practicing for 38 years, and I would say 2022 to 2025 were actually the most unexpected times in terms of price fluctuation. But what has happened from 2025 to today? The first thing is that a lot of it is attributed to panic. From the day the Strait of Hormuz was closed, you found people, including those who were even producing in Nigeria, complaining about the Middle East crisis, and immediately prices started going up. And one of the key things is that a lot of buyers decided to slow down, because I'm speaking on the transactional side of it, believing that, things had to change. So we have seen longer negotiation periods than before this crisis. We are seeing more joint ventures instead of outright acquisitions, because people are saying, you know what, let me share my risk with the owner of the land. So if these costs escalate, it's not just going to be on me. Investment decisions are taking much longer, because you find that a lot of institutional investors are carrying out more extensive due diligence and demanding stronger returns before deciding to take the plunge. But let me now be specific about Nigeria, because there's still other speakers. The impact is really amplified here because many development materials are imported. Higher shipping costs, we know that has happened based on the Middle East crisis, has also squeezed developer margins. Elevated financing costs, fortunately, not so much in Nigeria as other countries. Our financing costs have been relatively stable since this crisis happened. So in rounding up, I would say the overall picture is that last year was characterized mainly by a cautious recovery from the previous years that I had mentioned. But a lot of investor confidence has come in. Periods for concluding transactions have lengthened, and the time needed to complete deals have continued to increase. So one critical thing that I think I would want people to take away from this is that a lot of what we are seeing is really panic from the end users or from the buyers as against the actual need for cost increases. So I'll leave the floor for others to speak. I'm sure there'll be other questions that will be thrown at me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think this even eases us back into the perspective I wanted Mr. Hakim to speak from. And you've mentioned quite, some major things. One is like the panic, that a lot of time is not necessarily what is going on, but like the emotion and panic around it that's driving the market. And I think you mentioned majorly, people exploring more partnerships like joint venture instead of taking on the risk alone. And Mr. Hakim, you are a developer. You've been in the market for decades. What are you seeing with respect to today compared to 2025 from a construction and development activity standpoint?
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope I'm very audible. Thank you very much for thank you very much for having me. It's a very critical issue that we're looking at this morning, and I like the perspective that Geo has already given us starting off. When I saw this topic, I think the first point I said I would stress is that we really have to go a bit back. We have to go back, say, to 2020, 2021, because a lot of the issues that we're witnessing today is merely the snowball effect of what has happened post-COVID. We'll recall that after COVID, the world was yet to recover from the global chain disruptions that came with COVID. Because I always stress that people don't understand that China is the supply chain capital of the world. And for an industry that relies heavily on a lot of materials from China, this industry was heavily affected by the disruptions that came from COVID. But you recall that, so after COVID, we were talking about the odds and ends of COVID-19, But as the world was about to recover from COVID supply chain disruptions, the Russia-Ukraine war started. Now, that region accounts for a significant percentage of sourcing for critical materials for the industry, particularly steel. I'll give an example. About the middle of COVID, reinforcement per metric ton was like 150, 180,000. And I remember that when it jumped to 500,000, I was one of those who raised alarm on a few platforms in Nigeria, and then you saw what has happened since then to reinforcement as we have it today. So we're yet to recover from the Russia-Ukraine war when the issue in the Middle East started. And I like the angle that Benga has looked at the matter from, because a lot of the times we tend to lump the issues together, So there are country-specific issues. Now, talking specifically, in terms of what was before and what I think now is, you will recall that in Nigeria, by Q2 2025, real estate became the third largest sector of the economy. So you have real estate, 16% of the economy, no, 12.8% of the economy, and you have construction, 3.9%. So if you aggregate both, you are looking at about 16 point something percent of the, which is very significant. You are talking of a 54 trillion economy. If you add real estate and construction, that's very, very significant. Now, so there was very positive sentiment in the market about the industry. I mean, there were challenges. There was a naira devaluation, there was insecurity, there was uncertainty, but there was very, very positive sentiment about the industry. Now, what has happened is that the Middle East crisis, whether real or imaginary, has compounded the situation, like the former speaker has said, in terms of significant, because whether or not we want to admit it, the Strait of Hormuz accounts for, as we have seen, about 20% of global oil movement. Oil is very critical to the industry. A lot of materials are derivatives of the oil industry, so those materials, the cost spiked up, and it had a snowball effect automatically, and then supply chain disruptions. But particularly for Africa, in terms of diaspora remittances, 2025 diaspora remittances to sub-Saharan Africa was between 94 billion and 110 billion US dollars. Nigeria was almost 23 billion, far higher than what we make even from oil. Now, with the disruption, particularly with the crisis in the Middle East, a lot of the remittance come from the Middle East, and we've seen significant reduction in that, particularly in Kenya and some other African countries. If you look at the remittance in Nigeria, it's not been very significant, But as time goes on, if you continue to have the level of disruption that we have in the Middle East, you'll see significant reduction in diaspora remittances, which has come to be a significant source of funding for a lot of African countries. I'm just going to stop here, and I know that in the course of the discussion we'll have to add a few other things, so other speakers can also speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hakim, and thank you so much for sharing that. I think one major thing you mentioned is, the sequencing of events that has sort of like compounded into what we are seeing today, not necessarily a singular event. And I would pinpoint specifically the oil price increase that we have seen, as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war, down to the one that we are currently experiencing. And even though, everybody on this call will know that there's heavy reliance, I'm talking about Africa now as a continent, on imported oil, even though a lot of countries, have oil. But that heavy reliance on imported oil had an impact, on the market when they closed the Strait of Hormuz, and also even going far back to the Ukraine war. And I think that is from that angle that I would like Ms. Adetong to pick this conversation from. Energy is a key component of your facility management customer. What are you seeing today compared to 2025 or far back? I know there are efforts to introduce local refining in the country, but events like this, the sequence we have seen all the way back to 2020, has had multiple impacts on the market. What are you seeing from a facility management standpoint?
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And yes, it's an interesting topic. It appears complicated, but when we look at the facts on ground, we can only see, out of every challenge, there is an opportunity. So with regard to the real estate, the facility management sector, just before the escalation in the Middle East, we were very excited to see the Dangote refinery come on stream. And then there was confidence restored that there will be supply confidence for, improved supply confidence for oil. And then here comes the escalation. So there was more pressure. There's more pressure on the supply. But by and large, energy is one major ingredient is a major cost driver in the facility management field. Because here in Nigeria, we're still not fully, the national grid is not sufficient, has not been sufficient in delivering power for the use of the citizens. So what has happened is diesel has been a major, alternative source of power. And so with the increase in oil prices, this has put a lot of pressure on power costs. So in the facility management budget, what we're seeing is that is actually a very single most expensive item in maintenance, in running daily costs. And so there's been a lot of pressure. And then the national grid also was challenged. I mean, it's still being challenged, especially now in Nigeria, that there's a lot of, the rainy season has been very heavy. There's been a lot of power outages. So of course, the price of diesel has come up. Diesel, it comes first in maintenance cost. Then you have, in running cost, sorry, because you use it to power common areas for electricity, water treatment plants, the security systems, other essential estate services. So of course, maintenance cost is on the rise. Even cost of lubricants, spare parts, and logistics has come up considerably because you need gas to power cars and everything. Generally speaking, even the cost of living has risen. So people are asking for more wages. Electricity remains a significant cost, especially where the grid is, like I said before, is unstable. So rather than quoting on percentages, which could vary from estate to estate, how this cost has affected, I would say that diesel has experienced the most significant cost pressure, followed by maintenance and electricity. So the overall effect is a noticeable increase in service delivery cost, reinforcing the need for energy efficient systems. So of course, we start seeing a lot of priority. People are placing priority on alternate sources of power like solar, like what's it called now? Solar inverters.
Yeah.
And then even those, you also need some form of electricity to still power them when they
Yeah.
go down. So definitely the diesel cost has gone up significantly. Now, so one of the things we began to do is to look at preventive maintenance. What can we do to at least make sure that there is a balance? Because the cost has gone from about, between 2025 and now, we've had like 100 or 100 or more, 100 and more than 100% increase, and that's astronomical. So we're seeking alternative source of powers to sustain our communities. So that's been what we are seeing for now. It's inevitable, whether it was emotional, whether it was a perceived, increase. The actual thing happening now is that diesel cost is extremely high,
Hi.
and that's affecting operations.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a lot of us on this call, especially even residential occupiers can agree to that. Service charge has increased following the cost of increase that we are seeing. Diesel has almost doubled, if not more, over the last 1 year. Thank you so much for sharing that. Mr. Benga, we'll come back to you a bit. You mentioned something that I believe is extremely critical, and which is like one of the impacts we are seeing in the market: longer negotiation time for transactions to close. So I don't know what the numbers are from your perspective. Maybe deals that are, should have taken a few months to close are probably taking much longer. But I want you to double click on that a little bit. But from the perspective of off-plan projects that were originally sold in the market, how is that market performing? Now that costs have gone up, a lot of developers might not be able to fulfill their obligations for people that bought into projects or plan. What are you seeing in that segment, and what are your advice for people in those situations?
Thank you very much. I wish I had about 6 hours to speak about this because this is something that affects me directly. You see, I tell you this, and Hakim has touched on some of these things. The changes we have seen have been unprecedented. There's a project we have just delivered. When we started, reinforcement was 480,000 naira per ton. By the time we stopped buying in 2024, it was 1.5 million per ton. Who do you pass this on to? Unfortunately, I'm not a contractor. We had a fixed contract, which the contractor reneged on. Do you start going to court? So the problems are very heavy. The question then is, how does the developer handle this? And I'll tell you some things that I have seen in practice. The first one is that developers explain the cost increase, sit down with the buyers, and try to renegotiate. But remember, you have a contract. If your buyer is not understanding, you have to stand by that contract, bite the bullet, and take the loss. That's why you are in business. So a lot of developers are actually losing, especially those who are keeping their credibility. But this happens to those who have not bulk purchased materials, because once you have your funding and you are able to ensure that you have, purchased your materials, you will not fall victim of this. At least 80% of this. You can buy your elevators even before you break ground and several other things. Second thing that people are doing, which we totally disagree with, because some of these are sharp practices, is that they start changing specifications. So if you have promised to put in marble at 35,000 per square meter, you then drop it and bring in the lowest end materials from China at 14,000 per square meter. We see this happening, but it is extremely wrong, and it's a practice that should be discouraged. But other practices that people are doing is, some people phase delivery. If you had planned to deliver everything together, you sit down with your end users and you say, listen, I was meant to have delivered in January, but for XYZ reasons, give us 6 additional months. And it is happening. People in the market have to be more understanding because of what has happened in the past. But what are we seeing now? The industry is gradually moving away from fixed off-plan contracts towards arrangements that share inflation risk. What do I mean? It is either you pay a large sum upfront so that your developer or your builder can stockpile materials, or you share in the upside while you're sharing in the downside as well. Now, another thing people are doing is much shorter sales windows. So you ensure you push your product out very quickly. You have a very brief period to sell, and then you stockpile your materials immediately. But by and large, what is most critical, and this is really advice for people out there, is that you seek developers who are preserving both their reputation and their business, who will communicate with the end users. Because if I use an example of the project that we've just delivered, we decided to take the bullet all by ourselves to ensure that our reputation is kept. And that is very important for the market. So I see a lot happening in the next few months, especially as people move away from buying land to doing more of joint ventures so that risks can be shared. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is for developers to ensure that they deliver in accordance with their contracts, and contractors as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Mr. Gbenga, you are doing a very excellent work in making my work easier. Just some of the things you share helps ease the conversation into the next. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I think the major thing I pick is risk sharing as a way to mitigate the current landscape. From a developer's perspective, unfortunately, a lot of the players in the market don't have the war chest to absorb a lot of upfront costs. They try to do off plan to be able to secure, some money from the market. But I mean, we are in this situation. Um, Definitely, risk sharing would is a good way to go. And you mentioned something I find very profound is rethinking how our contract structure, and that will lead me to like the question I have for Mr. Hakim. um from all you've learned over the past, I would say 5 to 6 years from COVID down, how are you rethinking contracts with your JV partners, with your subscribers? Are you pricing in a lot of this volatility? I know obviously fixed contracts no longer work. What are you experiencing in that regard, and what would you advise developers who are looking to build something sustainable in the market?
Okay, thank you very much, Martin Uche. I always like to use data for illustrations, because a lot of the time when we listen to Benga, we don't understand the real depth of the
Of the
problem.
things he's saying.
You can have variations, you can have price spikes, 15, 10%, and whatever. So I try to look at data across is it 6 or 7 African countries. So I look at pre-war and post-war, pre-Middle East crisis and post. I look at Egypt. Year-on-year increase was between 12 to 15%. Post-war is between 25 to 30%. I looked at Nigeria. Pre-war was 30 to 35%. Post-war is 45 to 60%. Look at Ghana. Pre-war, 18 to 22%. Post-war, 35 to 42%. South Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, a lot more manageable. So the real issue is that you have an industry where, because a lot of the time people don't understand developers, and I like the point that, and I want to underscore the point that Benga has made. As a developer, your number one currency that you spend is integrity. You cannot afford integrity deficit. As a developer, your number one currency is integrity. When you make a promise, and I've also had a project before where we had made a promise, we had sold a part on off plan, and then the market went south. We had to stand by our promise. We had to deliver. We had to sell other assets, brought in the money just to deliver the product, just to deliver the project, because we needed to maintain our integrity in the marketplace. That is very, 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 very important. So at the end of the day, the reality of the matter is that we're in a situation where, so let me talk about off-plan, for example, because that's a major issue in Nigeria. People sell off-plan, they can't deliver, they start to pay all manners of pranks with off-takers. That is why we have a lot of the problems that we have in the market. My view, and that goes to how to structure your contract. Because I'm a lawyer, I try to structure my contract in such a manner that if I sell to you as an off-taker, and you have expectations, you have guidelines, you have SLAs on how you should pay your balance. As long as you meet your SLA, I will deliver at the price I have agreed with you. But in reality, if you sell to 10 people, only 5 people will meet the SLA. There will be other 5 who will not meet. As long if you fail to meet your SLA by 1 or 2 days, there's a clause in your contract that says that you are liable to price increase at our discretion. And it doesn't matter what you say. So we need to be able to put that balance. Once you have that balance, it becomes very important for you to be able to calibrate and do what you need to do to deliver. The way the market is going, the volatility that we're seeing, we haven't seen the end yet. So you're right. Benga is right. People are de-risking, people are rescoping, people are stalling. I stalled some projects. For almost 18 months, because I had to consolidate. And when you're in a volatile market, one of your strategies is consolidation and harvesting. You know where you want to harvest, you know where you want to consolidate, and you know when next you want to move. Benga mentioned phased execution. That is a fantastic strategy that developers need to consider, because a lot of the time, developers have project indigestion, not understanding that when you get to this industry where things can just go, where costs can just go exponentially overnight because of so many things outside your control, you also have to ensure that you measure the scope of the risk that you expose yourself to in the marketplace. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I think you mentioned something very important that I would like you to touch on again before we move forward. Are you seeing an end to this volatility? Because if people are stalling project, it's most likely the price will remain high in the future. And how can they manage some of those exigencies? And I think you can touch on it, and Mr. Benga, you can chime in as well. For people delaying or phasing projects, there is no guarantee that a ton of steel that is sold for, 1.5 million naira will come down to 700K or 500K in the future. Are they just carrying that into the future? Or what are your advice around, even phasing project or stalling project and things like that, particularly for people that have already sold a part of the project of plan to subscribers?
Okay, let me jump in first. If you're a developer and that's your business, obviously when we use the language stall, maybe it's a bit harsh. Maybe it's opportunity to de-risk, to rescope, and to take another look at the viability of the project and see the kind of things that you could do. Maybe you want to value engineer your whole project at this stage so that you know what you are taking to the market. You want to look at alternative raw materials at the beginning so that you know what you're selling to your customer, rather than start to sell luxury product and then begin to play all manners of prank with your customer. So what developers are doing is to take a second look. And there's a compelling case for phasing. Phasing helps you to minimize your risk. If you're doing 100 units of project of various typologies, and the market spikes out of control, your risk is still manageable. Imagine you're doing 500 or 1,000, and anytime you proceed phase by phase, every other phase you get to, there's a premium on that side for what I've already done. So there are compelling reasons even for going by way of phasing. And then you're able to manage your risk, you manage the scope of your exposure, and you also manage the expectations of the market. Frankly speaking, when I hear people in this market saying they launch 5,000, 10,000 units, I always go to look at their pedigree. I can't see that you have delivered 50 or 100 units before, and you go to the market, you are launching 2,000, 3,000 units. I want to look at your pedigree and see what you have done in the past. So when you say you are stalling, as long as you are not going back to farming, you are still in this business. You're just stepping back a bit, taking another look at the industry, taking another look. For example, the two projects that I said we took our time on, we're back on the projects now, but it helps you to come into the market at the time that you've seen some measure of stability, some measure of relative interest. So one of the projects, for example, what I did first of all was to go on roadshow. Went on roadshow. I went on roadshow to various countries, building interest in the project, but telling them that we've not fixed the price, we're still at the preliminary stage, it's going to happen very soon and things like that. And by the time the market was a bit stable, we came back to the project. Of course, it doesn't mean that the price of steel, of reinforcement has gone back. It has gone up, it's like 1.7, 1.8 million per metric ton now. You're using the kind of one that has the strength that will be easily approvable by the regulatory authorities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gwenga, do you want to touch on that before we move on?
I think Mr. Gunero has actually nailed it. The only thing I want to add is that when you store, you are looking for money. Look, if you have run out of money, you store. But then to keep your integrity, I like what he said earlier on. You sell your houses, sell your cars, whatever you have, but deliver to the people you have promised. And that's the reality. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Permit me, I would like to contribute at this point.
Yes, ma'am. Please go on.
I think that one of the things that I see happening is that developers have also become very creative in developing and in delivering projects. I know that and I stand to be corrected, one of the major things that taking bulk of the money is the foundation and the finishes. So people now do different levels of finishings, classic, premium, and so on and so forth. So the external looks the same. They've done the electrical, they've done plumbing, those things that at least, jointly, and they connect the different units or apartments together. And then so the owners of the houses may now choose to finish internally at their own taste. Because what I found out is that sometimes when people finish in the same style, some buyers will still come back and say they want to do their finishing differently and tear down everything that the person has done internally. The buyers may not be able to control the external, but internally. So developers have begun to say, you know what, let's deliver class. But if you want the premium finishes, then we can do that for you. So in that way, it makes it more affordable. And then people are also beginning to do mixed developments where you have residential and commercial in the same space, and people are finding them more attractive. That's what I noticed.
Thank you very
Excuse
much.
me, moderator.
Okay. Yes, please.
Can I say one more? Can I say one thing?
Definitely.
I really feel so happy to hear, even we are not in the same country, but I'm really so happy to say, to hear so much about the developers. So can I react a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, sure.
Okay,
Sure.
Because as a developer for 37 years, I really love the way you saying the integrity. Really, as a developer, we really watch, whatever, to please our customer. So I have one saying, for the things you can see, we do our best. For the things you cannot see, we treat it sincerely. I think I always believe the after sales. Even we sell them, and then we keep our promise, and then we deliver our property to them. And after sales is continually to build up our relationship with our customer, and that is what I always say. The brand power, because they will bring up the branding with your customer relationship, and they will refer their friend, and even themselves will buy the second and third, and then I said the brand power is the marketing power. And the reason I would like to share is because for the 37 years, the most major things in Taiwan, I think I can sold my project before. I'm the one in our countries. I don't need to do any advertisement. Everything I find a piece of land, and I starting to design, and before I put on the market, already have waiting list waiting for our project. So I thought as a developer, especially in this timing, we facing all the unpredictable, the war situation, the cost increase, and we really need, even in Taiwan, the advertisement is not work. You put even how much the advertisement you spending, if you don't have enough brand power, or you don't have the enough support from your customer, it's really very hard. Even we're talking about the cost increase or the price increase. But if once we have it, so I think we have one saying: I'm not selling the property. I'm selling their home. So
Yeah.
you look at the property, only the real estate, the project, but we think about it's their home. They work differently. All the design, all the inquiry, all the detail, you will think about their needs, their home. So I really would like to cut in. Sorry, probably I'm not a part of the speaker, but I just would like to let you to share my experience in the other countries as a developer for 37 years. Okay.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
Madam
that is,
President. Thank you, Madam President.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that is very, very I would say a very transparent way to put it. You said something very powerful. For the things you can see, do your best. And for the
Yes.
things that you cannot see, be honest about it. And
Yes.
I think it's the integrity issue that every of the speaker have alluded to. And that will lead me on to another question I would ask you, Miss Adeton. How have you been able to manage rising costs for running your facilities? Let's assume people prepay for things like power, maybe diesel throughout the year. You've collected money from residents to run the facility for the next 1 year. You've collected service charge for the next 1 year. How are you managing all of those? Now that diesel has doubled, cost of running your estate has almost tripled in some instances. How are you managing all of those volatilities in practical terms? That somebody joining this call who is a property manager or oh, I think we lost her again.
You
I think we lost her. She will join back soon. Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, you are
Oh,
here.
okay.
Okay, thank you. So, how are you managing all of those volatilities at the moment in practical terms?
Okay, thank you very much. So it's very unlikely that would ask any customer to pay for power 1 year in advance. And that's simply because of inflationary factors, even before the escalation in the Middle East. And service charge from day one is usually a deposit. So one of the things that we began to do, and which we've encouraged developers, and for developers out there, we're encouraging developers to get facility managers involved in their project from the conception stage. So we have smart, interfaces like the Vencos of this world, where you can measure your services in a very transparent manner, measure power, measure other things. There are some factors in the service charge component that are fixed, labor costs, and labor and some other services. So what happens typically is there will have been a budget. We have a case in hand whereby about maybe 9 months ago, we already did a service charge account. I mean, it kind of the developer was yet to hand over, but we had an idea of what service charge. We had discussed it. But by the time the project came to life in May, it was obvious that what we had projected was no longer going to work. So we had an honest conversation with the residents. This is what it was, but this is not going to work anymore. So there were decisions we had to make in terms of they were supposed to have 24 hours power. Do they still want to do 24 hours power? Are we going to now have like a routine thing? I mean, a router to say power comes on at this time. But that house was heavily, I mean, the alternate source of power is solar. So people, even when the generator is not on, can rely on the solar generation. Luckily, being a residential apartment, most people are out during the day because they've gone to work. But we have cases whereby some people work from home and they have to have their power. So each apartment is metered. You have the meter that can measure your consumption for both electricity from the national grid and from the generator supply. So you pay as per your consumption. So one of the things that I will say clearly is the issue of transparency, where you are transparent in the way billing is done. Number two is effective communication. When things happen, you have to let your stakeholders know that this is what is going on. On the part of the developer, I like what Mr. Akim Oguniro and Mr. Olanio have said. There is the need for integrity. Some developers don't have it. When they cut corners to do certain things, some of them still want to be in charge of certain things and make money out of it. But at times like that, you have to really, really, I mean, it's obvious, empathy has to come in. If people were buying diesel at 950 naira per liter to 1,000, and then we have to buy at 1,800 to 2,000 per liter, that's enough. I mean, and their salaries have not necessarily increased. How are they going to be able to cope with that kind of living? So communication, transparency, then economic spending. You know, we give a lot of attention to preventive maintenance. Are there things that, you know, there are systems that we need to put in place to ensure that the running cost of the place stays low? Buying in bulk, the generator maintenance, managing. If the generator has outlived its life, there's no point flogging the generator. It ought to be replaced. So there will have been a sinking fund account in place to ensure that when the generator has outlived its life, or any other asset like that, you change it. Routine maintenance also, we don't have to have emergencies all the time. You ensure that at least the routine, the preventive maintenance, everything is done according to pattern. Okay. And of course, keeping your employees happy so that they don't sabotage the whole process.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing.
Can I just make a small contribution on this?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, Mr. Olani and I, we both sit on the board of an FM company in which we both have interests. And we've seen quite a number of issues, you know, and I just want to say one of the major issues in the market today, one of the major problems in the market today, you know, it is good for you to have a platform that measures what each person uses. But the real problem is, how do you deal with the redundant power? So you have a 30 apartment estate, and then during the day, you know, only 5-6 people are vending power, and you are running generator 120. You know, typically you have a small, you have a big one. You know, it's a major problem in the market now, because there are people who work from home. They will insist that I'm working from home, you have to give me power 24/7. You know, and my position is that when you are running power for 30-40 people, and only 6 to 10 people are vending, it's a problem, because there's a significant cost of redundant power. And the question is, who bears the cost of that redundant redundant power?
Redundancy,
you know,
yeah.
These are some of the issues. These are some of the issues that you have in the market today. You know, and I guess as time goes on, we just have to find a way of dealing with those issues.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much.
At times like that, you know, there's usually what they call a slave generator. In some cases, you have the apartments don't come into full capacity at the same time. So you obviously will graduate the power supply that you're doing there. So that's why I said those people that want those power at all costs will pay significantly for the difference. That's how we have managed it. And then you also have slave generators. Another thing is, there has to be a realistic situation where you have to have some downtimes too, where at least it will allow the generator to rest and people can. So inverters, I mean, solar power now can power, I mean, as much as people's air conditioner and all that. So they should have a downtime of 2-3 hours just to at least save the life of that equipment. Because if it's grossly underutilized, it shortens the lifespan as well.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's very, very critical. And one thing I'm picking is, this conversation is a lot more layered. There are multiple layers to it, and that would even help unpack some of the things we want to talk about now. Mr. Hakim, you've shared a lot about, you know, some of the approaches you use in delivering your product. I'd like you to touch on when you are working with subcontractors who might not necessarily be thinking as long term as you are. So you have like subcontractors, you have people to do MEP work for you. How are you managing those? Because that can be a risk to the overall. You can hedge yourself, at the higher level, but those will I call it sub functions within the delivery of a project. And I think it cuts across like almost all the all the segments of the market. How are you able to manage all of that to bring everybody on the same page?
Okay, I mean, clearly that's a major risk. And sometimes when your subcontractor falters, say, for example, your pile foundation contractor, when your pile foundation contractor falters, it affects your delivery, it affects your promises, And I'll give an example. As a project, it's not a very large project. I think it's just 16 unit apartments that we started somewhere on the mainland, and then we awarded the piling contract to a pile foundation contractor who had worked in the estates, in that estate ecosystem. He had delivered several, so that was one of his credentials. Unfortunately, he started struggling. Some not due to his reasons. Apparently, before we bought the land, a whole building had been buried. A whole bungalow had been buried in the land before we bought. So you're doing piling 30 meters. So 11 meters, you're meeting obstruction and things like that. That was a major issue for us. In terms of, back to the issue that we were discussing before, in terms of how a developer reacts. Now, we had started to sell for this particular project off plan, and we had sold to some diasporans. So when this issue started, and it was clear that we won't be able to meet the delivery timeline, we called a meeting and we gave an option. These are the challenges we are facing. If you want to opt out of this contract, and initially, only a few people, but eventually, almost everybody opted out of the contract. Some people we paid, some people we paid with interest, some people we just paid their sum, and then we gained our sanity. I tell you that's probably one of the best decisions I've taken in my life, because if we had gone ahead, by the time the project was back on stream, the market had moved, by almost 50-60%. It would have been impossible to deliver the project. So I think we need to do, as a developer, you need to be very brutal in your due diligence on the subcontractors who work for you. Don't just say, because this person is my church member or is my brother-in-law or sister-in-law, I'm going to award my subcontract to him. You have to be very, very brutal in your due diligence, because you ride on the back of your subcontract to deliver to your own customers. So due diligence, also make sure that you're a bit flexible in your contracting with them. Sometimes you can do a fixed sum contract, but when things shift in the market, you also must understand that there's no way this person can deliver in terms of the price you have agreed with him, and you must be able to sit down with him, and then the two of you can meet yourself both ways. So it's a very volatile environment. We have to be very robust in our approach. We have to be sometimes very deliberate, and ensure that we work with those subcontractors and ensure that they do not become the breaking point for our project delivery. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was muted. Oh, thank you very much. And I'm sure a major part of that decision, beyond just timeline, would also include just your understanding of, this project is not going to be just viable again, because you have probably spent double to do the work, to evacuate whatever is under and be able to deliver. How has some of these cost conversations influenced your assessment of viability of projects?
See, I mean, as a developer, you are concerned about your asset conversion cycle. That's the board. You have to focus on your asset conversion cycle. I begin this project, I start putting in this money, is when this cash will come in. When you're in a volatile market, that is where you have to have your eye. You have to focus on cash. One of the things I always say when I have the opportunity, one of the things I was taught in business school, is that turnover is vanity. profit is sanity, cash is reality. There's no greater tourism for that except in the real estate industry. Real estate is generally an illiquid business. So liquidity is very critical to you. Otherwise, when Akin calls this seminar next year, you'll be in your village. You'll be doing something, you'll not be a developer again, So understanding how you match your assets and liabilities sustainably over the long term is the primary duty of a developer. You have to be able to match your assets and liabilities sustainably. So cash, margin, your cash and margin, for me, is more important than volume. The quality of your project. If I'm doing just one or two projects, I don't have to necessarily show 30, 40 projects in my portfolio. If I'm doing one or two projects, sometimes you need to balance, you need to balance, Sometimes you need to balance, for example, I want to consider doing a project on the mainland and also on the island in Lagos, so that you're able to play along the vagaries in both markets, But at the end of the day, it's about, do you have cash to continue your project? Cash, like Benga said, it's about liquidity at the end of the day, and that is what we need to focus on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gwenga. I would ask you to share your perspective from a very different angle. This is a very volatile market, and whether we admit it or not, there are key segments of the market that are very important to how capital flow in the market. And one key aspect is the valuation of assets. DFIs rely on quality valuation to make decisions. Banks rely on quality valuation output to make decisions. Institutional investors and other capital allocators, everybody is looking onto valuers to guide them in decision makers, in decision making, what to invest in, and all of that. How has the volatility you've seen in the market, I would say over the past 6 months, changed your perspective around how value opinion should be arrived at? And how is that influencing even how buyers and other end users, evaluate projects and opportunities in the market?
Thank you very much. The interesting thing about valuation is that the value of a property is as at the date of valuation. So in a market that is volatile, your valuation figures have to move. The biggest problems that we see, very recently we were asked by a bank to check out a valuation that was done by someone. And before we even went there, the first thing we said is, what was the date of the valuation? And they said October last year. And I said October last year, Lekki Phase 1 land up to June this year had already moved by 22%. So there's no point coming to discuss this. Just get the property revalued. The very first challenge in this market is the lack of transparent transactions. In many parts of Nigeria, most parts of Nigeria, there's relatively few publicly available arm's length sales. You're sitting down here and you sell your property for 1 billion because you don't want your family members to know how much you sold it for. You declare it at 500 million. That goes in the market as your sales value. At the same time, because you want people to feel you've got a lot of money, someone else will say, I got 2 billion for a property that he got 1 billion for. This is a peculiar problem with Nigeria. In South Africa, your actual price of sale is what is recorded in the deeds office. And this is the same continent. Similar thing happening in a country like Egypt. It's quite clear. So for us, valuation is simply like you're buying and selling of a computer. How much did 10 people next to you, remember I said 10 people, not one person. So how much did the next 10 people sell for? So it makes valuation much more difficult in Nigeria. And we find that prime income producing assets in strong locations may have retained value reasonably well, while secondary assets in the same similar location with high operating costs have experienced much greater declines. So what we see is a situation where valuers have to continue to re-educate themselves. The consequences of overstated valuations in the market today can be very significant because for banks, inflated collateral values may create a false sense of security. At
Yeah.
the same time, vastly reduced values would not work for the person who is producing his property as, a collateral.
Yeah.
There's one key thing I also want to mention because banks use forced sale value as what they use for loans. And valuers, I mean, I spoke at a NIFE's conference and I had to say this quite clearly. Valuers tend to say the first sale value of a property is 66% or thereabout. That is extremely false. You learn that in school. If today there is a very active market, and I say this at the risk of putting my license online, if today you have a plot of land for sale in Ikoyi at the right price, you would sell it in 3 weeks. What that means is because the Ikoyi market is active, your first
Yeah.
sale value can never be less than 85% of that. Because what that means is you do not have enough time to expose that property to the market. So your first sale value as at that day is very close to market value. But when you have a market where the economy is in a situation where people are not buying properties, your first sale value can even be as low as 50%. Or you're selling a property in your village. So what am I saying? Because I want to ensure that I do not leave the crux of the question.
Yeah.
How are valuers keeping to this? The key point is there are two critical things in valuation. One is integrity, the other one is knowledge. And I
Yeah.
dare say the biggest problem, based on what I've said here, could be knowledge, because my belief is any valuer who holds the seal of the Estate Surveyor and Valuer Registration Board in Nigeria and even other African countries should be above board. But for us here, because of the volatility of the market, I mean, a plot of land in Lekki Phase 1 that we were to put on the market in January, we did a valuation. The owner called us in March saying, guys, you have undervalued our property. And we had to explain to him the market has moved 15% between January and March. You can go and verify this. So valuers need to keep very, very close with the market. They have to realize that today's value can change tomorrow. But by and large, the most important thing, especially for those who use valuation reports, is please always remember that the valuation you are given is the value of the property as at the date of valuation. Our market is so volatile and it will change tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. Because of time, we're going to run very quickly. So I'm just going to ask a few more questions, then we'll take questions from the audience because people are asking us questions from LinkedIn as well. So, Mr. Dayton, I want you to help us unpack something. A major chunk of the developers in the market run a build, offload, and move on strategy, if I will call it that. So they build assets, they hand it over to either residents association or hire a facility management company, um, to run it and then move on to the next project. And if I'm going to be honest, in situations like this, we have quite a number of bad players who might reduce specifications unjustly, some of the things that we've mentioned, and then they deliver a property that is not of the right standard, and the burden of managing all of that from the resident's perspective, the user's perspective, now fall on you. How are you handling some of these, excesses in the heat of, the current um, volatility that we are experiencing in the market? And maybe if you can expand it a bit to advise on what, should be done. I know you have already mentioned including facility managers at the beginning of every project, which is very critical because when things go wrong, the developer might be able to get away with it, but the facility manager is now the one that bears the burden on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, thank you so much. So one of the things that I will take it from, I have to, they are interwoven. So one of the things that we had a strategy session in our organization about 3 weeks ago. Just look at what has happened half year, and because of the economic realities, one of the things we decided was that any facility management brief we're going to take, there has to be electrical and plumbing audits, and the clients must pay for it. The reason is because we took on a facility because the client had been our client for about 20 years, and we took caution to the wind. And we now came and found out that a lot of things were just not the way they should be. And like you rightly noted, the residents were taking it out on us. Now, I liked what Mr. Akim Oguniran said. One thing is clear from the beginning, the contracts, the service level agreements. As facility manager, we are to take care of common areas. Okay. And for us to take up any project, another thing that we also decided is that there has to be a defect liability period. Whoever the developer is that is handing over a project to us, at least for the next 6 months, they should be able to take responsibilities, minimum of 6 months actually, for certain things that go wrong, electrical, plumbing. I mean, we've had a situation whereby a lift was delivered and residents began to live there. Within 1 month of living there, the lifts have gone bad. They now have to order the parts from China. And people on the fifth floor trying to move into the apartment had to be carrying their things. They struggle to get in there. And so they turn on the facility manager, there's a lot of violence. So what we did was that we were very clear with the developer that this is outside our scope. Our own facility, luckily we had signed the agreement and our job description was very clear. There are standard operating procedures that have been laid in place. We have a service level agreement that states precisely what we are supposed to do. But because we're also on ground, there are cases whereby we could help the residents to resolve some of the issues. But clearly, it is not part of our scope. But for empathy's sake, maybe it happens in the middle of the night. There's a situation whereby there is flooding everywhere in an apartment because a pipe has burst. As a facility manager, it would be unfair to leave the resident to be in a pool of water, or maybe there could be a domestic accident. So that's one way. But going forward, there has to be electrical audit, there has to be plumbing audit. We also have to have, the mechanical and electrical drawings in our possession so that at least our team can trace certain things that are common to all. That is, is not negotiable. And again, clear terms of agreement, who handles what. That's how we've been able to handle it. In fact, we're
Okay,
exiting
thank
a
you.
site now because the developer obviously didn't build well and he was trying to shift the blame. And because of our own integrity, we had to say, we're sorry, we cannot do this anymore. So we walked away. So we've also learned that it is not every transaction that we have to be involved in. We have our standards, and as long as it doesn't meet our standards, you're not going to find us there anymore.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And I think, yeah, I think it's very critical that you do that because we've seen a lot of challenges in the market where the developer just build anything they want, hand it over, or probably sell it, and from I would say day 0.5, the burden of managing all of those challenges now falls on the facility manager. I'd like us to take a few questions before I give the room for final thoughts as we wrap up. We have a couple of questions on LinkedIn. If you can touch on some of these, that would be very helpful. Someone is asking, are there affordable technologies that smaller estates can adopt to improve energy efficiency without capital investment? The second one is, I think we can take all of them at once. Given the rising cost of replacing critical assets like generator and inverters, what best practice do you recommend for buildings and managing sinking funds? Um, Maybe the last one, how can preventive maintenance be structured to reduce emergency repairs and extend the lifespan of assets? Mr. Adeton, maybe you can take all of them. The first one is proactive measures, affordable measures to drive efficiency in this volatile environment. The second one is best practices for managing sinking fund. I think you've touched a bit on that before. And then lastly, advice on preventive maintenance to reduce emergencies. If you can touch on that, so we can go take the few last questions.
Okay, so for every facility, there must be a standard operating procedure whereby you have your routine maintenance and then the preventive as well. You should, as much as possible, reduce emergencies. So the SOP would also guide you to know what are the critical things to do for what, which are the essentials and non-essentials. So routine is things that you must do daily, things you check out for on a daily basis. Preventive are, I mean, we know what that is, that in order for your generator not to break down, for example, you need to service your generator every 200 to 250 hours, depending on the lifespan of the generator. Lift maintenance as well. Those are things that, I mean, you need to critically have a signed an SLA with the lift provider or whoever is going to maintain it for you. CCTV, talking about, I mean, safety of the facility. There are things that you need to do, to keep it running. Aesthetics, painting. Do you want to paint annually? So those things are things that would also guide how your budget is formed. And so you need to critically, spell all those things out. Even for a lot of the service level agreements that we have, we obviously will state our standard operating procedure there so that the clients can also measure our performance. It's very important so that everybody will be held accountable. Then the issue of sinking fund, that's very critical. Replacement of, assets that are capital in nature. You want to replace your generator, the water treatment plant, the roof goes bad. I would advise that from the beginning as a developer, even because most people just want to buy, they probably bought with mortgage, they're more interested in paying off their mortgage. So they may not be too vested in spending money along the line. But of course, to keep the property maintained, you have to keep investing back to keep it, alive. So the developer from the beginning should have it in the contract that there is a sinking fund that has to be paid. Even from day one, they should make the subscribers to make some monies available for sinking fund. If after the development they choose to hand over to a homeowners association, that's one of the things that must be in the contract going forward, that on a yearly basis, they have to separate some money. Maybe it should be in an interest building account where the stakeholders would appoint who the trustees of that account would be. So it's inevitable. The sinking fund thing is very, very important so that the estate can, at least the lifespan can be spared. Somebody was talking to me about a project recently. It was a joint venture between a local government and a developer. And they gave the developer a 60-year lease. And the person said if in 60 years the project does not need to be brought down, then the subscribers can just simply renew. And in my mind, I'm thinking, did you build for 60 years for a house to just last for 60 years when you can plan for the long haul? I mean, there are buildings all over in the Western world, like the cathedral, for example, in Marina. That building has been there for years. And that's because it was built to last. So one of the things we need to make up our minds to do in the built environment is to invest in buildings that last, our infrastructure as well. So sinking fund is not negotiable if you want to have a growing and lasting community. From the beginning, people should sign, as they're signing their sales agreement, that they will subscribe to, contributing to a sinking fund account. And like I said, interest yielding. I can't remember what the last question was.
Okay.
It was 3 questions.
Yeah, you've touched on it as well. The sinking
Okay.
fund was the last one. You've touched on all three. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go to the last round of questions, and I want us to unpack a few things that I've heard from this conversation so far. Mr. Benga, you raised a very important point around data transparency in the market. People don't have verified comparables. That nobody is obligated. The system does not obligate people to, you know, give information that is useful for the market, that is useful in informing decisions in the market. And what you have in circulation are just a lot of either mostly inflated prices. We see a lot of great capital coming into the market, buying assets that if you think it through does not necessarily make sense. And then a lot of the transactions that are being happened that is happening in the market, there's no transparency in terms of um, relinquishing this information for authorities and professionals to make informed decision of. I like you to go from that angle to just what should the market do? What should we do so that people can have access to information to make decision of? I mean, we as a company, we advise a lot of developers on feasibility study and things like that. And you are right. The biggest challenge is even finding comparable actual transactions that has happened that is not sponsored by great capital, that follows the laws of demand and supply, and it's very difficult to find in the market. From your perspective, how can we, push for transparency in terms of people just um, putting out the right information with the right authorities and making that information available for the market to act on?
Thank you. I think the very first thing would be a reorientation of our culture. Strange as this sounds, it is a major problem. I'll give you an example. About 12 years ago, I was planning to sell, I actually sold my house that I was living in. I put a for sale board on my gate, and a few friends came. You're selling your house, and everybody will know. And I thought, whose problem is it I'm selling my house? Culturally, it is as if you have a problem, which is why you are selling your house. Meanwhile, I was actually upgrading, but it wasn't anybody's problem. We have that big cultural problem. And honestly, I think the coming generations, the millennials and those behind them, do not care. So a lot of things are going to change. People are becoming more transparent. People realize that what the man next door thinks about my transaction does not matter.
True.
So I think the fundamental thing, first of all, is that cultural orientation. Then the people who govern valuations in Nigeria, which is the institution of estate sales and values, there must also be an orientation for people to realize why these numbers have to come out. But I now tell you the biggest challenge why people do not post the actual amount they have sold for is because of the stamp duties that they pay to government. So I've sold my property for 200 million, I declare it as 100 million, and that is what is registered. So it is a cocktail of big problems. But one thing I will say is at the end of the day, the actual valuation figures, the onus falls on the valuers who must ensure that they work harder and they stop looking at the adverts in the newspapers and online as opinions of value. The adverts show asking prices. They're not the prices at which people are actually concluding deals. So I would say all of this falls back on the professionals who are actually doing the valuations to ensure that the market is appropriately guided. I can speak on this for the next 2 hours, but we don't have time. Thank you very much. I think you are muted.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
All
Thank
right.
you very much. And I think you nailed it. It's very important for the profession to uphold the highest standard um, I would say, competence and professionalism. And I think there's also the part of the regulators as well. And if you can touch on that a bit, because anywhere in the world, you are legally obligated to declare certain things. You can sell a property for 200 million, declare 100 million, and there's no penalty for it. But you can't do it in the States. You can't do it in the UK. You can't do it in South Africa. You can't do it anywhere in the world because there are, I would say, regulatory, there are laws that prohibit you from doing that. And I wonder why that is the case for Nigeria. But thank you so much for sharing that. And I think the next question I wanted us to unpack, Mr. Hakim, is around construction cost. We are too reliant on on import rather, extremely exposed. Almost 70% of what you find in almost any construction site, the more luxury it is, the higher the number. They are imported. They are imported from China. They are imported from, Italy. They are imported from other regions around the world. How do we build local resilience so that somebody being angry somewhere far Middle East will not in fact impact the project going on in Ikoyi? Somebody deciding, to close his door in the far west does not impact, a project happening in Lekki Phase 1 or an entire economy. How do we bake in local resilience in construction particularly, so we are not experiencing a lot of these um, fluctuations?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I mean, we must admit that the world is so interconnected that even if you produce everything in your country, when these things happen, when these geopolitical destructions happen, nobody will be immune from them. But the question you have raised, very fundamental, but it's a question that is much bigger than the real estate industry, because our industry relies on inputs from manufacturing and from all these other people. In Egypt or South Africa, for example, I mean, Benga has already alluded to those examples. If you are running your project and you run short of some critical building items, you just go down, you just drive down 1 or 2 hours down the road, to go and replenish your stock, which you may not be able to do in Nigeria, because we rely heavily on imports. I think that imposes a lot of a significant challenge on us as a people to develop local capacity. I attended Africa International Housing Show very briefly in Abuja last week, and it was gratifying to note that there's a large volume of local players who are now producing some of the things that we need in this industry. But it's a far cry. It's a far cry from what we require. I'll tell you, for example, tiles, for example, as basic as tiles is, what we produce in this country cannot even meet 5% of the demand, So at a broader macro level, government has a lot of responsibility to create an environment that will encourage a lot more people to set up all these local industries. We need to have cottage in some countries. You see cottage industries. If you go to Spain, for example, those who produce marbles and all this stuff, when you go, you just see small cottage industries who produce and deliver all this matter. But when you have such a stifling industrial environment, it becomes very, very difficult for us to deliver. So it's a macro question, and I will see this opportunity once again to appeal to our government that we need to focus on industrialization, because it's when we do that we'll be able to deliver in that respect. I wanted to add, based on Benga's last, what Benga mentioned, whether it was Benga or you, mentioned regulation, and the impact on regulation on costing. The reality of the matter, I've been speaking for the 5 years that as a country, our industry is entering the era of regulatory intensity. I think based on what we have seen since the beginning of this year, we have entered the area of regulatory cost escalations, because if you look at what has happened to the cost of survey, to the cost of approvals, and recently to the cost of perfection, value of perfection of properties for perfection, in some cases as high as 200, 300, 400%, because all this has come back to the cost of housing delivery at the end of the day. So as a developer, we also need to pay attention to what regulation is saying, both in terms of compliance and in terms of how costs of regulation also affects what we do and deliver to the people. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. We are just gonna do rapid closing thoughts. We'd like to hear your projections for the next, say, 12 to 24 months, and advice for operators in the market. You are a lot more senior practitioners in the market. What would be your advice for the younger people, operators in the market who are managing complex situations? Just your final thoughts on a lot of the things we've spoken about in general, and just specifically things that people can take out and go implement today. I'll start with you, madam. If you can share some thoughts, Ms. Adeton.
Thank you very much. I see a lot of people these days that just call themselves facility managers just because they can negotiate contracts and bring maybe vendors together. Facility management is beyond that. There are about 11 competencies that a facility manager should have. I'm actually a member of council of the International Facility Management Association of Nigeria. And one of the things that we realize is that a lot of people are lacking in knowledge. They're not willing. And that's because the barrier to entry is quite low. So there's been a lot of advocacy. Government institutions, organizations are beginning to recognize that for them to have efficiency and have value for their money, they will only engage people that have knowledge and are also accountable. So my advice to young people would be that they should seek knowledge. They should get the necessary qualifications that qualifies them to operate. The second thing is they need to join professional associations. They need to have mentors, and then they should build to last. Building, there is a time to learn and there is a time to earn. Most people want to earn before they learn, and that's creating a lot of issues in the industry. So I'll advise that people should submit themselves to mentors also, and also be so that they can be accountable. Then we should deal with conscience. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The facilities management job has to do with empathy. You have to empathize with the economic situation and be truthful enough to at least put your customers first in your delivery of your services. That will really, really distinguish you, separate the men from the boys. In the words of Akin, you'll be the purple cow, So I want to encourage young folks to, please go downwards. They should have the right foundation before they now, grow upwards. And then for the government, there's need for in the real estate value chain. There are lots of associations. We all need to come together to make a difference. We need to collaborate and synergize. I am a member of a few associations. I wear many caps. I'm an estate surveyor and valuer. I am a facility management professional. We should stop running parallel. Let's see how we can all come together and have a voice, so that when anything happens in the real estate sector, they need to get in touch with the stakeholders first before the legislators can make, they can make decisions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. One thing I took out: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's very powerful. Mr. Akin, please, can you just share final thoughts with us? If a young developer is on this call, how do they navigate the situation, the current environment, and stay in business, so they then go back to farming? Thank you so much.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Fiapsi, for having me on this panel. I think that for This is a very interesting industry. Opportunities, huge opportunities. We're a country of about 240 million people. We also must understand that the percentage of people below 30 is about 60 something percent, So there's a huge because all these people, they're going to have to leave, they're going to have to go to work, they're going to have to go to shopping malls, they're going to have to go, they need hospitality and things like that, So if you look at real estate from this perspective, you'll see that there are significant opportunities in this market. You want to be a developer that will be in the game for the long term. I think the first thing you must master the development process. You have to master. I always talk about mastering the development process from land acquisition to pre-development to actual development to post-construction management. You just don't have a choice but to. Your financing strategy must be optimal. I always say, for people who have listened to me, as a developer, you must be driven by ROE, return on equity. Return on equity, because there are two other ROEs. There's ROE, return on ego. There's ROE, return on emotion. As a developer, you are primarily driven by return on equity. You have to, somebody says, I want to build the tallest building in Yaba. Is it a viable project? You may be chasing return on ego, not return on equity. As a developer, you are deploying risk capital. Your question is that, what is my asset conversion cycle? If I put in this money, will I get back? What is my threshold of return expectation? Will it come back to me? If it will, finally, I want to stress that people must understand that real estate is a business of compliance. It's a business of regulation. It's a business of compliance. The reason why we see many people run into problems today, demolitions today, this one tomorrow, is that people have not come to terms with the fact that at the heart of real estate, at the heart of real estate transparency is real estate regulation. If you're a developer, you must understand the rules and regulations. As a company, finally, just before I say it, sometimes we pay the price because sometimes we delay, I'm not going to till the ground, for example, in Lagos, until I have my title, until I have my approval from LASFA, until I have my permission to go to start from LAPSCA, until I have permission from Lagos State Safety Commission, and all the other AUs. You have to understand these regulations. You have to move with those regulations. You have to be in tune with those regulations. Your due diligence must be exceptionally prime. You must be in touch and understand. And I like what Tomo said. Real estate is a business of networking. Everybody on this platform I know. Now I've met Martin. I know the president. I know Tomo. I know Benga. We network. You can, as a developer, you are building somewhere. You must know everybody. You must know the village head. You must know. It will be sad if they shut your site and you don't know who to call. You must know the DPU. You must know the Omonile. You must relate with them. They must know you. You must know them. That is the reality of the business that we run. You are a corporate Omonile in a way, and you must run your business in a manner that shows that you are in tune with the realities of the market. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Benga, your final thoughts, sir. What should people, young people, many of them joining this call? By the way, we had 194 people join the session across our platforms. What should they take home? What do you advise they do in this kind of environment?
Well, thank you. On a lighter note, when I saw this topic, I thought about it that people say 3 key things about real estate: location, location, location. But it is clear we have to add a 4th thing, which is the Strait of Hormuz. That is the 4th key thing to think about when considering real estate. But if I'm to bring this to reality, the first thing is you must not box yourself into a small area without thinking about things happening globally. Because if you do not think along those lines, you could find yourself being heavily surprised. And I want to touch on what FIAPSI President Lily has said, talking about integrity, that any project she starts, before she breaks the ground, it's already sold. And it's a similar situation in Nigeria. Some people come to me and say, oh, how does X do it? How does Y do it? It is because before he even starts, he has sold. And do you get your integrity in one day? No. You have to build it. There are times for you to till the ground. There are times for you to sweat. There are times for you to cry. And I used an example of a project we have done, one of our recent projects that we are making next to nothing. But you know why I am so happy? Some members of my team are even wondering that, why are you so happy at this stage? Because we are able to deliver what we
Wow.
our subscribers.
Thank you.
Your name is the most important currency you have. You need to always realize that money can come back tomorrow. But once you destroy that name today, it is the end of it. You put a dynamite under a 30-story building, it can come down in 1 minute, but it will take you several years to build it. So above all, when you go back to listen to all what we have said today, please remember that a name is bigger than any other thing you can think of. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very powerful. Thank you so much. That is very powerful, and I think very, very useful for this time and any time at all, honestly. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the call. At this point, I'd like to hand over to
I saw
Shata.
a comment. Sorry, Mr. Uche. Martin, sorry. I saw a comment. Somebody was asking that for Nigerian young professionals, is there a mortgage system? I'm wondering if the person doesn't know about MRIF. The federal government has made available effective mortgage for public servants and other career people. Oh, most certainly there is a mortgage system. You have the MRIF loan that you can obtain 100 million naira paid till the age of 60 at 9.75%. And as a public servant, you also have access to the National Housing Fund. That also you pay to the age of 60, and at an interest rate of 6%. So I'm sure your office, you will have been doing some deductions from your salary. So go and find out from the HR what they've been doing with that money. That just caught my attention, and I thought I should speak to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for pointing that out. And I think there are a few more questions. This one I think Mr. Agbenga touched on it, and the last one was, from your practical experience, how often is the retention sum actually enforced on projects? Is this standard practice? And after handover, what's the typical period before the retained amount is released to the developer? This is talking about retention fund in new development, more like the defect liability period that you spoke about, madam. Maybe you can touch on that very quickly before we wrap
So
up.
it's a minimum of 6 months, at least for the people, when people are started living there for 6 months, to test all the, all the fittings and fixtures in the house. You don't want to have a house and then they turn on the tap, there are leakages here and there. The earthing is not good, so the electrical shocks people are experiencing. As facility managers, we always advocate that there should be a defect. I mean, there should be a hold. I mean, they should retain some money of the key developer. I mean, the project people, the project team, so that if there's anything, they can as well attend to before they leave. Because if they've been paid 100%, there's a possibility that they may not come back. They may say that it's a return job using our Nigerian balance. So I think it's safe to do, a kind of retention fee, maybe a 15-20%, and then the people come back in 6 months if they are sure what they did, so that everybody is not from day one in an uncomfortable situation. That's what I would recommend. But the developers are here.
Okay.
They should be able to tell us practical examples, what they've been doing.
Mr. Aki,
You've
do you
answered
want
the
to touch on
question.
that before we go?
No. She's already
He's
answered the
asking
question.
from your experience, retention sum, the money buyers withhold from the developer until they are sure that what they bought is working. Does that
And that's
happen
not
in
what
practice?
that's not what it's talking about. It's talking of what you retain from contractors for different liability period.
Oh,
Honestly, from
yeah,
buyers.
yeah, true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
from buyers.
from
So
contractors,
typically,
rather, I mean.
typically is 6 to 12 months. Although you can have a different agreement, but it's enforceable. Um, in practice, we've had cause to call on retention sums in the past, and we've also had cause to pay. I'm doing sand filling somewhere now, and I have retention. I'm doing block. We're doing block. We're doing several thousands of blocks somewhere now, and we've put in retention, and I will not pay your retention until the final final result comes from Lagos State Material Testing Laboratory, So those are some of the things that happens in practice, just to ensure that you do what you need to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gbenga, do you have anything to touch on that? And maybe you can even touch on the second part of this question, because
maybe just to add to that,
okay,
the quality of contractor you use would also pretty much determine how you are able to even get back your retention. Because you might get to a point where even the contractor's performance, say you have a retention of 10%, you cannot cover your loss with that 10%. You've paid the contractor, you have retention of 10%, and the contractor has done a shabby job. So sometimes you have a situation where even the retention, which is like some form of insurance, cannot cover your loss. But at the end of the day, is it enforced? Just as Hakim has said, it is generally enforced, and it's enforceable in the contract.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe you can just talk about the second part of this last questions before we wrap up.
Oh, that's the valuation, right?
Yes.
Okay.
He's asking, should valuation reports in volatile markets include more forward-looking risk analysis rather than
now
relying
in valuations, you always have a figure. The figure in your report is the value as at the date of valuation. But people ask why valuation how the market is going. You will have explained the expectation of the market. So just as this person has asked, should reports in volatile markets include a more forward-looking risk analysis? That analysis is expected as a part of your report, where you are explaining the market, where it is coming from, and where you believe it is going to. But what we should never forget is that the actual figure now is your opinion of value as at the date of valuation.
Okay, thank you. And the second part, how frequently should lenders or investors who depend on these valuations revalue assets? Like the example you gave, a valuation that was done in October, they are asking you to review it, but obviously that has been too long. You need them to revalue. How frequently should revaluations happen?
Now, what we always advise financial institutions in particular is that the market right now has just gone haywire. So you cannot rely on valuation reports that are kept in your safe for a lengthy period. It will be impossible for anyone to tell you that a valuation report on the 27th of July would not, the value on 21st of July would not change by the 21st of August. So we always give the caveat that on big ticket transactions, as long as there's a substantial period, in a volatile market, 1 month can be substantial. In a
Yeah.
stable market, you can hold that valuation for even 3 months. So
Yeah.
carry out the valuation at the time the decision is going to be made. That is what we
Yeah.
tell people. Do not do a valuation, keep in your safe for you to dust it, clean the sand off it, and use it in future. You'll get your fingers burnt if you do that. So we tell them, make sure you give the instruction when the decision is about to be taken.
Thank you so much, everyone. For this has been very rich, very rich. One of the best conversations we've had on this webinar series. So thank you to FIAPSI for having us. At this point, I'm going to hand over to the chapter president and our chief host to wrap us up. But thank you, our speakers, for joining. This has been very, very insightful. Mr. Akin.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Martin, can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, this has been a real masterclass. I've really learned a lot. I'm certain that our audience too have learned a whole lot. I know I could see people from across Nigeria, Africa, and across the world. But let me also give the opportunity to our distinguished world president, Li Chang. She's in the US, rushing off to one of these UN meetings. So for the opportunity to give her own closing remarks, and I will now wrap up. My president, you have the floor.
Her microphone is
My
muted.
president,
We can't hear
you
you,
seem
ma'am.
to be muted. No, we still can't hear you.
Okay, can you join back?
I join back
Okay,
again.
We can hear
exactly.
you now. Oh,
Oh,
she went up.
Yes.
okay, we can hear you now.
Can you now? Can you?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Akin, and thank you, everybody.
Oh, you've gone off again.
You've gone off again.
Yeah, rejoin again.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry, I just do my remark or whatever. Yeah, because when I become the world president, I only say something. I would like to bring the love and the sharing, sharing the best practice. And today I really see all the speakers and everybody is really sharing the best practice. And our responsibility is not to discuss politics, because I thought for the themes we were talking about that, but I find out you are very good on the strengthen the resilient buildings project and transparent market and the quality of life. So I would like to say is at FEAPC, we believe we are not only building property, we are building better community for future generations. So, in today's this online meeting, online forum, I saw it. So really so appreciate. And that is very remarkable, to see all your Nigeria chapters, to organize this kind of program. It's very good. So thank you so much for me to join you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much, my
Okay. So I have to,
distinguished world
can I say bye-bye to everybody?
Oh, yes, you
Because,
can.
Yes,
Yes,
you
you
can.
can.
okay. So hope to see you in
Bye.
person next time. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes.
So I also want to sincerely thank our moderator, Martin Uche. You will all agree that he has guided the conversation expertly.
Yeah.
And of course, to our exceptional panelists, Mr. Akim Oguniro, Mr. Gbenga Olaniyan, and Mrs. Adeto Otekola for sharing your deep experience, insights, and of course, practical experiences. Like I mentioned earlier, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience would have also. Special thanks to Fortren Company for partnering with FIAPSI Nigeria to organize this important conversation, and to everyone working behind the scenes to make this event a huge success. And finally, to every one of you, the participants, it's been well over 2 hours and it didn't even show. Your presence, your questions, very engaging, very enlightening questions, is what made this conversation extremely, extremely meaningful. As professionals, let us continue to think globally, collaborate intentionally, and build real estate markets that are resilient, innovative, and sustainable for future generations. On behalf of FIAPSI Nigeria, thank you once again for joining us. Have a fantastic rest of the day.